This is Season 1, Episode 5 of Twins Discuss. I'm Raquel, a research scientist.
And I'm Raven, a medical professional.
Today, the twins discuss the Below grocery store murders. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast contains mentions of graphic violence and death that may not be appropriate for some listeners. This podcast was written using information from various sources. It is presented as accurately as possible, though some of what is mentioned is simply speculation. Sources can be found on our social media pages at Twins Discuss Podcast. This is one of the top unsolved cases in North Carolina, so it is an incredibly cold case. And I typically hate talking about cold cases or any case that does not have resolution because it can be so frustrating.
I'm surprised I've never heard of it before. I don't even know what a Below is.
Yeah, so the Below, which is BE-LO, was a grocery store chain that was in the rural parts of North Carolina, I think back in the early 90s, 80s or so. They don't exist anymore, for what I could find. If they do, there may be one or two, but everything I found said they were all defunct. So, but it was like a popular gathering place for people in small towns, you know, because back in the day we didn't have Twitter and social media and ways to call folks up, and besides the phone, the landline, or, you know, the snail mail.
Speaking of Twitter, we now have a Twitter.
We do now have a Twitter.
It is at Twins Discuss. FYI, just dropping that in there and continue.
Yeah. But we were going to originally do a different case at episode 5, and I was digging through the North Carolina cold case files and decided that this one had every element of a story that should be popular. Like, everyone should know about this case, and if I'd never heard of it, if you never heard of it, then it's down in the deepest parts of the cold case files in most places then, because this should be more popular. And when I went to dig for it, there's hardly anything out on it. I had to go through microfiche and, you know, subreddits, and I finally discovered this book by an author and kind of a investigator in North Carolina. He's from North Carolina, named Jeb Bond. He wrote this novella called Closing Time, the 1993 Below Murders, and he still updates that book when leads present themselves, because he is very interested, as I am now, with hopefully getting exposure and generating leads on this case. So a lot of what I talk about comes from his book, as well as from his website, which is closingtime.jebbond.net.
How do you spell that?
JEBBOHN.
Okay.
Yeah, .net. And it's a novella, so it's 45 pages long, because there is just so little out there on this case. You can go through the old news articles, which I found through microfiching, and I think I found 3 or 4 that talk about it, which when you hear the story will be incredible, because like I've said, it has everything that you would need to be a popular murder case, and that should have gotten tons of media attention even for its time, and it didn't. Now, in the little town that it happened in, it's like this, you know, poltergeist that's constantly walking around town, because nobody's ever gotten peace from it. It's never been closed.
It sounds similar to a case I heard a couple of weeks ago about the Burger Chef murders.
Actually, what ended up making this case be interesting to me is that it reminds me so much of the Burger Chef murders and the yogurt shop murders in Texas. So Yeah, for people that don't know about those, I don't know if we're ever going to do a podcast on either one of those. They're fairly. I mean, I know that the yogurt shop murders is the most popular unsolved murder case in Texas. I don't know about Burger Chef.
Yeah, Burger Chef, I believe, was in, was it Lexington?
Kentucky?
I'm not sure if it was in Kentucky or if it was in Pennsylvania. They all kind of merged together. Well, I know this sounds really bad, but I listened to so much. She's looking it up right now in case you hear the clicky tappy.
Yeah, I am, so that we can have resolution on this. It occurred in Speedway, Indiana.
Indiana, that's right, Speedway, because it was named after the Indianapolis 500. Yeah, it's very interesting case. If you want to check that out, it's called the Burger Chef Murders.
Yep. So, this may not be a long podcast just because there's so little information available, but I'm going to try and tell the story as best I can and see if, maybe anybody knows anything or knows someone who knows something, wants to look into, the resources that we provide on our social media pages, dig into this more. I'm incredibly interested in this case. I hope that other people become interested in it as well.
Oh yeah, I definitely am.
So this event happened in a little farming town called Windsor, North Carolina, which is about 30 miles outside of Edenton in Bertie County. I know that I have driven through Windsor before. I've also driven through Edenton. Yep. If you're heading up towards Manteo, the Virginia Beach area, sometimes people will drive through it. Windsor is a really small town. At the time that this incident occurred, there were only about 2,100 people living there.
Oh wow, it's as big as where I live.
Yeah, exactly. So everyone pretty much knows everyone. Even today, there's only about 3,300 people living there.
Oh, wow. It's still really small.
Yeah, super small. Which is why this case hangs over everyone, because most people that move there or live there raise their families there and they never leave. The reason that the population, it went up a little bit in the early 2000s and then almost 50% to over 4,000 people, but they've had a steady decline just because it's an agricultural town. And that's had some hits recently due to, every industry's had hits, but it's had some hits recently in North Carolina.
It's losing significant popularity.
Yeah, it is growing a little bit. COVID kind of helped with that because people wanted more space, so they're starting to move into places like Windsor, and Windsor is close to the coast. You are 40 miles from the beach in Windsor.
That's appealing.
Yeah, it is to people that like that. So, it's not. I'm not saying that this little town is without crime. No matter how safe your city is or your little town is, there's always something. You live in a town that basically, I've looked at the sex register list for your town.
Sex offenders?
Sex offenders registry. There's one sex offender in your entire town. And yet your car was broken into a month ago. So crime does happen even in small towns.
Yep, that was very surprising discovery.
Yes. Yep. And in a lot of these small farming towns, petty crime is a big thing, because of drugs, methamphetamine, things like that. So Windsor is not without its little low levels of petty crime and assault, and they're all mostly misdemeanor level offenses. There's quite a bit in these rural farming communities. Domestic abuse.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, so that's something that happens around there. And issues with getting drunk, walking out on the street, drunk in public, stuff like that happens. And that happens everywhere, so, I'm not calling them out on it. But it doesn't happen so frequently that it's all that happens there. It's not like New York City, where that is such a common scene that people probably don't even notice or care.
Not for stuff like that. I mean, you get it's I forget who wrote about this, but you get a bunch of people together and the evil comes out. Individually, drunk in public, no big deal, whatever. But getting strapped for cash causes people to do a lot of rancid things.
And all you need is one person to convince you that it's not a big deal. And in big crowds, that's easy to do. Get in the wrong group of people, it's easy to do. So, but the thing about Windsor is that if you go get drunk in public, everyone in town's going to know about it. And they're going to call your mama, they're going to call your grandma, and then somebody's going to have your ass. So they keep a lot of it controlled. Might be somebody else's
grandma.
Right, exactly. They keep a lot of it controlled. They're a very tight-knit community, and murder is or was absolutely unheard of there.
Okay.
And it, at least, and everybody felt safe, and they all felt safe until this particular Sunday evening in June 6th, 1993. So the Below grocery store was the only grocery store in Windsor at the time, and it was within walking distance of everyone's home. It'd kind of be like where your nearest grocery store is to your house would be like the furthest house away from the grocery store.
Wow, yeah, that's really close.
Yeah, folks would probably ride their lawnmower up there if they lived a little bit further than you did.
I could definitely walk there easy in less than 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yep, and there was a lot less traffic back then. So, folks would go there and they would, and this was mentioned in Jeb Bond's book, he would say that folks would just walk up to the grocery store to talk to people. They weren't necessarily going there to shop.
Okay.
And it almost makes me wonder after reading through this case if the person who committed this crime knew the type of business this was, how popular it was, or if they just drove into town and did what they did. But something just makes me think they must have known how popular it was, to do what they did. So the store was managed by a 47-year-old man named Grover Lee Cecil Jr., but everyone called him Bud. He was a devoted husband and a father of 5 kids. He'd been managing. I think he'd been managing the Below for 6 to 8 months. It wasn't a year yet. Yeah, very nice man. Everybody loved him. Also on shift that particular Sunday night was cashier, and they called them registers. I don't know.
I've only worked retail business once, and we were just put on the register.
Yeah, and I've heard it, I've read it both ways. I don't know if that's a particular thing for that area, but I called them cashiers. But the cashier working that night was 36-year-old Joyce Coburn Reason. She was recently divorced and actually engaged to be married in the coming months, and the mother of identical twin girls.
Oh,
yeah. Their names are Nikki and Melissa. Yeah, and Nikki's actually a lawyer now. I think she works in Winterville, which is right outside of Greenville, where ECU is, East Carolina University.
No idea.
Okay, it's towards the coast. And then actually on this particular night, they normally would be the only 2 people in the store closing on a Sunday night, which the store closed at 6 o'clock in the evening on Sundays.
Oh, wow, that's early. Well, not for there, but...
Right, yeah. But this was the weekend after Memorial Day. So the owner, or the manager of the store, had actually hired a cleaning crew to come in and clean, strip, and wax the floors this particular night. So there were actually 4 extra people in the store working past closing. 48-year-old Johnny Rankins Jr., 40-year-old Sylvester, also known as Tony Welch Jr., 50-year-old Jasper Hardy Jr., and his younger brother, 48-year-old Thomas E. Hardy. And just to limit some of the confusion in this story, I realized that there are 4 juniors going on here.
Sounds about right. So how many people does that make? 4, 5, 6
That
people?
makes 6. 6 people, yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's the Hardy brothers. I just made that connection. The Hardy brothers, and then Tony Welch, Johnny Rankins, then there's Bud Cecil, the manager, and Joyce Coburn Reason, the cashier. So 1 woman and 5 men.
Okay.
So I guess we will get into the event.
Okay.
Like I said in the past, a lot of what I am about to discuss comes directly from Jeb Bond's book, Closing Time. Straight from the timeline to how people interacted, because he did an intense investigation on this story. I believe he's from a town close to where this occurred, so he has more of a vested interest. He's also older than me, so he's had more time with it. This obviously has occurred in our lifetime, and I'm sure that if we mentioned it to our parents, they may have heard of it.
Probably.
But 1993, I mean, it might as well be 100 years ago.
Comparatively.
When it comes to crime, yeah.
I mean, everything pre 9/11 is how we date things in timeline now. So everything pre 9/11 is, well, pre 9/11. Right. And then, we in North Carolina gauge things by, other murders and events, like Natalie Holloway.
Well, we do, yeah.
We do things like that,
Eve
but
Carson,
yep.
Faith Hedgepeth, yeah.
Yep. Anything, pre 9/11, it's pre 9/11, and it sounds terrible, but we just don't gauge things like that anymore.
Well, we're also a different generation now than the people that are actually starting to write these stories. I mean, we're in our 30s, and it blows my mind to this day that there are 21-year-olds that were born in 2000. So these are people that are working on these stories now, the newer ones, and they chronicle things differently, and they get their information differently, and stuff like this is not online, or there's not a lot of information on it online. When you Google this story, it's 2 pages on Google search.
Oh, wow.
Right. It's so old that a lot of it was still in paper, and then most of the information. I was so lucky to come across this book. I actually only found it because I was digging through Kindle for other things and just decided to throw it in the search engine and see if something came up about this, whether it was in, a chronicle of news stories, or in a history book or something. And I was lucky enough to find this book, which was enlightening. So, a timeline of what happened. The store closed at 6, and around 6:15, Bud started walking through the store with the 4-man cleaning crew that was assigned to wax the floors, and the doors were locked up front. Joyce Reason was actually at the front of the store when a man who had been hiding inside the store after it closed came up to her. He was brandishing a .45 caliber handgun and instructed Reason to summon the manager. So this guy, according to the NCSBI website, is a black male of medium complexion, approximately 30 to 35 years of age at the time. He would be over 65 now. He had a slender, solid build, a military-style haircut, light brown, slightly slanted eyes, and a narrow nose bridge that was slightly crooked. It had like a bit of a bump to it towards the middle of his eyes, which looked like a possible sports injury.
So you'll get into how they know this, because that's
Yes.
a lot of detail for. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll get into that. Once Reason called Cecil, he joined them up front, and the gunman actually forced the pair into the store's office, where he demanded money and collected approximately $3,000 in cash and money orders, which was a lot at the time. And that's the part that makes me go, did he, because this is a Sunday evening, I don't know if, money ran to the bank on Mondays or if it ran on, Thursdays before Friday, but they, bank hours, they don't typically do a lot on Friday. But it made me wonder, because that's a lot of money for a grocery store in the 90s. So did this guy know this place was popular? Just thinking, Anyway, at this point, he then ordered the pair towards the rear of the store. While they were walking, they collected the other 4 members of that cleaning crew, Johnny Rankins, Tony Welch, and Jasper and Thomas Hardy. And he told the captives that he was a former cop and that he had nothing left to lose.
Oh my.
Yeah. And while he was, walking the people back to the store, he just kept repeating this phrase, I don't want to have to kill anyone. I don't want to have to kill anyone. I hope that God forgives me for what I'm about to do.
Oh, no.
So upon reaching the back of the store, the gunman forced his hostages into binds, and he actually forced them all to tie each other's hands and feet up using duct tape and dog leashes that they had acquired as they walked through the store. Then he did something, and this is what makes this story have that element that, to me, should make it more popular. He forced his hostages onto the floor and then arranged their bodies into 3 different stacks of 2. He basically laid one person on top of another person on the floor.
What?
Right. And then he said again, I hope that God forgives me for what I'm about to do. And he shot once into each stack of people. The investigators at the time that this incident happened said that he must have done this to try and reserve ammunition.
That is horrible.
Right. So if he had a revolver, he only had, obviously most guns only have so many bullets in them, but he might have only had an 8-shot weapon or a 6-shot weapon. So he was trying to reserve ammo when he shot into him. And either he only had 3 bullets in this gun to start with, which is why he put them in stacks, or his gun jammed, but for whatever reason, he stopped shooting after he shot the 3rd round.
So he only shot 3 times.
He only shot 3 times, once into each stack of bodies. So, yeah, he then took the bodies and he laid them out side by side on the floor. And so there were 6 people laying on the floor. And this was so that he could determine who was still alive and who was dead.
No.
Yeah. And it's like almost clinical, the way that he did this. So then, after he separated the stacks, he placed everybody face down in this like ever-growing pool of blood. And that's how Jeb Bond describes it, so that he could survey his work. He, at this point, noticed that 2 of his captives had not been injured. So he left to go into the deli/butcher section in a nearby room. So at this time, Bud Cecil, Joyce Reason, Johnny Rankins, and Tony Welch had all been injured by the gunfire. But neither of the Jasper brothers were injured. So he went into that nearby meat cutting room and returned with a butcher knife. And he asked Thomas Hardy, he went up to him first, and he asked him if he was going to identify him. And Thomas answered, "No, I'm not going to identify you." The man basically dropped his entire calm demeanor that he'd had before and just screamed back, "I don't believe you." Took his butcher knife and slashed Thomas's throat. He then stabbed him with so much force that he broke the knife handle on the knife and left the blade in Thomas's back.
Wow, what in the world?
I don't know. So then, I mean, nothing surprises me anymore that people do.
No.
You know?
I mean, it's just the ferocity and the callousnesses will always, that is what will always get me.
Yeah. At this point, he turned to Jasper, his brother. And I mean, and you know, they had made eye contact with each other, Jasper and the man. And then, you know, he'd watched his brother just get basically stabbed to death. So the man, the assailant, thought that Thomas would die, was confident of it. So he stopped his attack on him, turned to Jasper and asked him the same question, you know, "Will you identify me?"
What are you supposed to say?
Well, Jasper Hardy's tone or his guardian angel or whatever star he was soloing under that was lucky gave him the opportunity to, and it must maybe because he was the last person that was attacked, but he said, "No, man, I don't know you." And the assailant looked him in the eyes, gave a brief pause, which Jasper later describes was the most agonizing moment of his life, and said, "Okay, big man, I'll let you live."
No shit.
No shit. And then, as quickly as this thing started, he started walking out. And he got his money. He threw the broken knife handle to the side. He stopped at Bud Cecil's body and took the man's keys before leaving. And he drove away in a, believe it was, let me pull up the or the NCSBI website. I believe it was a white Toyota Corolla, and was never seen or heard from again.
So at this point, Thomas has been stabbed, and so he's been stabbed. And who's been shot?
So Cecil, Bud Cecil, the manager, Joyce Reason, and Johnny Rankins and Tony Welch have all been shot.
Okay.
And then Thomas Hardy has had his throat slit, and he's been stabbed multiple times. And
Okay.
his brother Jasper is physically unharmed.
Physically is the best way to put it.
Yep. So at this point, after the man leaves, Tony Welch somehow or another broke free of his binds, drug himself to the phone, and called 911. Right. So, and I'm not sure if it's, you know, that Jasper Hardy was helping his brother or.
That's what I'd be doing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and you know, if anybody else is able to get to the phone and call 911, I'd be trying to stop you from bleeding to death.
That I would definitely
Yeah.
be doing that, and If you were unsalvageable or already gone or whatever, then I would move on to
The next one.
the next one. I
Yep.
mean, 911 would be in my head because that's the first rule of any emergency situation is call 911.
Yep. And
That's
Tony
a tough thing to
Welch-
prioritize.
Oh yeah, it is, and you have to separate yourself from the situation at hand enough to keep your mind calm and do what you got to do. And you've taught it, I've taught it, we've learned it. One of the keys to surviving a stressful situation is remaining calm and keeping your faculties about yourself, because as soon as you begin to let yourself slip, you're going to slide down that slope and it could be the death of you. Not that in this case anybody could have done anything different than they did.
Yeah.
They actually did, and I'll discuss this in one of our segues. They actually did everything that they could do to potentially survive this sort of situation.
Wow. So right now we have somebody's called 911 and we have one person who is physically
Uninjured.
unscathed, but everybody else is injured in some way and or dead.
Right. So Tony Welch was able to actually free himself because the duct tape had become so saturated with blood that the adhesive didn't work anymore. The bullet that struck him had lost a lot of its velocity because it had traveled through the body on top of him. It was on the bottom of the pile. So and this may have been discussed in the book, and if people don't know, I have a concussion right now, so my memory isn't what it used to be. And I can't remember how the bodies were actually stacked together, but I'm guessing that Bud, Joyce, and Johnny were on top, and the Hardy brothers and Welch were on the bottom of their respective stacks, which would make sense as to why Johnny ended up uninjured, and Thomas was initially uninjured, and Tony Welch, even though he was shot, was able to, survive that at that point. So Tony called 911, and of course Bertie County Emergency Services picked up, and he just said that he said, "Help, I've been shot." The dispatcher said, "Where have you been shot?" And he said, "We're at Belo's." And the police arrived at this point, and again, everybody in this town knows everyone. So when they arrived, they found the front door was locked, that they couldn't get in, and when they were able to talk to the person on the phone through 911 services, so they broke the front door to get in. They found a trail of blood that must have been left by the assailant, so they followed that back to the back room, where they found that Bud Cecil, Joyce Reason, and Johnny Rankins had all expired from their injuries, so they were pronounced dead at the scene. Thomas Hardy was severely injured but still alive, and he was transported to Pitt Memorial Hospital in Greenville. Tony Welch was also severely injured, and he was transported to Pitt Memorial as well, and Jasper Hardy had no injuries, besides the mental ones.
So wait a minute. You said Tony Welch twice, I believe. I'm not sure. So Thomas was transported, Tony was transported, and Jasper was left. He was
left to talk to the cops.
Okay, and the other three were dead. So far, half of them are now deceased from their injuries, as of this point. Okay.
As of this point. And actually, that's all that ends up dying. Thomas Hardy, Tony Welch, and Jasper Hardy all survive.
So wait a minute. The guy who got his throat slit and the knife in his back survived.
Yep, and I don't know if I should discuss how the throat slitting went wrong or not, because I don't want to teach people how to appropriately cut other people's throats.
Yeah, we'll just say that it went wrong.
Yeah. But he didn't do it right, and they missed everything. So he had severe tissue and tendon injuries, but they missed the carotids and the jugulars.
Wow.
And Yeah, he lived.
How mortifying.
Absolutely. But, I'm sure that his brother was, I'm not going to say thrilled, but happy that he didn't have to watch his brother get murdered in front of him.
I would be absolutely beside myself.
Oh, yeah.
In
But
every
they did
possible way.
Oh, absolutely. But, they did see, one of his coworkers get killed. The cleaning crew had actually only been working together as a group for like 2 months, but it's somebody that they'd worked with every day for 2 months, that died. So the police got there around 7:00. So the whole incident took 45 minutes or so from beginning to end.
Wow. God, that's
yeah.
terrifying.
And it is... It feels like it would take no time at all, and yet I'm sure that it was agonizingly slow.
Well, considering, I honestly think about this, with what I do for a living, how quickly 2 hours can fly by.
Oh, I know.
And, when we do certain things in my job, how, you have to do a certain thing for 25 minutes. And how quickly that goes by. And they're like, you've been there 25 minutes. I'm like, oh, have I? Wait a minute. We're not done yet. There's still so much to do.
That's what made codes and stuff, so hard is that or traumas, you'd have 10 minutes to get them off scene. With a code, you'd get 45 minutes to work them depending on. And it's like, has it already been? What the hell have I been doing? And yet, when I'm sitting in a dentist chair, I'll tell you what, that 10 minutes is my entire life. Back to the fact that we can't get numb, so.
You are absolutely right. It's like I got 18 minutes. 18 minutes before I know this stuff wears off, so we need to get going.
I know, exactly. Back to the story. There were witnesses outside that actually saw the car drive off, and they described it as a white car with Maryland tags. And they said there were 2 people inside the vehicle.
There might have been.
I don't know. There might have been. There may have been a driver and an assailant. And I don't know, if that was true or not. The NCS, and I'm not doubting what they saw, the NCSBI website only describes the one person and asks for information on it.
So at this point, we have a black male who was in his early to mid 30s who said he was a police officer who had a psychotic break
and nothing else to lose
and murdered a bunch of people, and now this dude is out there, possibly out there still doing who the hell knows what, or have done who the hell knows what.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting when people just assume that he never did anything else. But there are so many cases where things, like my favorite, if you can have a favorite, I do, cold case is the Monster of Florence. And it took them quite a while to tie all of these cases together because they spanned so long that to assume that this guy never did anything else just because he wasn't tied to this case doesn't mean that he just killed these 3 people, went off into the night, and lived a happy life. I mean, he may have committed other crimes.
Well, he got away with this
one.
atrocity. I mean,
Right.
He got away with this, and this was savage.
Right.
So who's to say that he didn't go, got away with that one. Now I'm going to go, rob the Handy Hugo. I mean, there's, and if you travel to a different place, because I wouldn't stay local.
As soon as you cross state lines, it changes how the investigations work. And in his case, if he was a police officer or in the military in the past, he knew to change his MO. I mean, Israel Keyes did the same thing. He did not commit any of his crimes the exact same way each time. He did not choose the same victim every time. There was no way to give him an MO because he didn't have one, because he refused to allow himself to have one. And this guy could have been in the same train of thought because he was a former cop, that he knew that if he gave them a second crime the exact same way or with similar things, because a lot of criminals like to use the same, weapons in the same situations because they know that they're reliable instead of having that unknown variable. But in his case, he may have been smart enough to say, we're not going to do grocery stores again, and we're not going to use a 45 because the damn thing didn't work, or next time I'm going with more ammo, Or he may have had a change of faith and decided that he was never going to do it again, and he might have gone off to become a philanthropist. Nobody knows because nobody's ever seen or heard from him again.
So what happened with the investigation?
So it was found out that that Bud Cecil and Joyce Reason actually both died because they had gunshot wounds to their head.
Okay.
Johnny Rankins had been shot through the back. And let's see, Welch ended up having injuries to his, reading through my notes. Looks like to his back as well. The investigation began, as most of them do, with securing the scene, and they found cartridge casings near the line of the bodies. Forensic determined that each shot had come from the same gun, of course. They found shoe prints tracked in all the blood of the victims. They found lots of prints, actually, because there were so many people, emergency services, walking around the victim trying to determine who was alive and who was dead.
Yeah.
But they were able to find one set that they figured belonged to the assailant, but they were never able to actually tie it to anything useful. They were able to get fingerprints that didn't match any of the victims, but
it's a grocery store.
Right. The grocery store is just full of fingerprints. And Jeb Bond even, discussed that in his book, that it's nearly impossible to tie down to one person. I mean, this guy, he didn't wear a mask. He didn't wear gloves. He didn't do anything to hide his face or any of his structures. And the police were like, all we've got left is trying to get fingerprints off the duct tape. But since the guy had his victims duct tape each other up, there was nothing there to find. Now, I wonder about that last one. Like, how does that last person duct tape? But maybe it was that the people were duct taped up and then they were able to still move the duct tape to tie the other person up. But either way, it didn't work. They didn't have anything. Mm-hmm. They did recover DNA that did not belong to any of the victims from Thomas Hardy. And they think what happened was that the assailant cut himself while he was stabbing him, and he bled on him.
I bet. I mean, I was just thinking about your comment about how they tied up the other one. You said they used dog leashes too, so
they did, yeah.
If he tied them with a dog leash, he's not going to leave prints on the fabric.
But he could leave DNA.
He could leave DNA.
I don't know if the technology back then would have been strong enough to recognize it. I don't know when PCR started or any of the more advanced methods, but I'm not sure. I hope that those dog leashes are still in police evidence. Yeah. Knowing the Bertie County, since this thing never got solved, the Bertie County Sheriff's Office probably does. I don't think they've ever gotten rid of anything on this case, but I don't know much about the law enforcement out there.
I don't know anything about law enforcement, really.
Yeah, I don't. I know that when it comes to missing persons, they can be challenging, but missing persons themselves are challenging. This isn't a missing persons. This is a multiple homicide. So the Windsor Police Office and the Bertie County Sheriff's Department and the NCSBI have never let this case go in particular. they've tried to figure out what the motive was. They've tried to track down this person based on the physical description, and they've never gotten anything.
I mean, you have 6 hard-working family people in a small town, 3 of which were viciously murdered in a 45-minute time frame.
Mm-hmm.
On a Sunday evening before 7.
Mm-hmm. Highly unusual. Like,
Yeah.
most violent crime occurs after 11.
Yeah. I mean, as you always say, nothing good happens after 10.
Mm-mm. Just go home.
Yeah.
Yep. So there's nothing. They got nothing. And they are and from the time that this incident happened, the police, their boots hit the ground and they kept running. I mean, they've been trying to solve this, and
So this
They
isn't shoddy
followed.
police work. This is
no, absolutely not. From the beginning, I mean, they tracked down a white vehicle that was driving erratically on US 17 at the bypass that somebody reported, and they tracked that car down, and they were trying to figure out, is this the guy that did this? And they weren't. They've gone through every single lead that they've gotten. They've questioned tons of suspects, and they've got nothing. There was a recent development in 2016 that they got a new lead. The Bertie County Sheriff Wallace Perry said that one of the surviving victims actually gave a different description of the killer. And this is 23 years later. But I could not find any other information on that new lead turning up anything that the police have released publicly now. The police do not have to tell us anything. And people need to understand that. When there is an active investigation going on, anything that we receive from the police department is a courtesy. They are not required to give us anything, because sometimes by doing that, when they go to investigate and actually interrogate people, those people could give them back information that they've already heard in the news that could muddle up whether or not they actually committed the crime. Because there's a lot of people out there that falsely implicate themselves.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not saying that the Bertie County Sheriff's Department or the Windsor PD are doing that in this case, but there may not be a lot to release on this, or they just may not be saying a lot because they don't want to potentially taint their own investigation. So that's kind of where we're at on this. Nothing. The day that it happened, and the second that guy walked out of that grocery store, got in that car, and drove away, as where all this, ended as far as finding out who he was. The families buried their loved ones. The injured, went through their recovery process, and nobody has found peace.
So why do you think that is? Why do you think that they haven't figured out or any leads or anything? Why do you, because you've done more research, of course, than I have on this.
Something didn't fall into place. There were no surveillance cameras to catch anybody.
It's a small town.
Right. We all know that eyewitness accounts are the most unreliable piece of information. And when you're watching your friends get murdered in front of you, you may not remember things accurately. And I'm not saying that their descriptions are wrong, but maybe something critical got missed. Maybe when the person crossed that state line, and with the technology the way that it was back then, when you put out a bolo on somebody in North Carolina, that bolo didn't necessarily go to Virginia or South Carolina. They didn't have this interstate sort of communication system. Everything was very localized to the county that it was in at the most. It went from the city or the town to the county, and you would be lucky if the state got involved. And a lot of that's changed these days. We have alert systems that will go across the entire country if the networking is available. But in this guy's case, when he crossed that state line, I'm sure that he disappeared into the ether and nobody's ever said anything. Somebody knows what he did. They know who he is, because there's no way that anyone can get away with something alone. Somebody had to, he may have bandaged his own hand, but somebody saw him do it. Somebody came in contact with him when he went and bought bandages and never even thought about that this dude may be this, mass murderer.
Yeah.
He's got friends, he's got colleagues, he's got
somebody knows
family.
His psychopathic tendencies.
Right. Somebody
I've seen
knows
that side of him.
Somebody knows that he did this, and they love him enough or are scared enough, or for whatever reason they're keeping their mouths shut. And to me, that is the most cowardly thing to do. And if you ever committed a type of crime like he committed, I guarantee you I would throw you in jail myself.
I believe that.
I would not protect you at all. And I think that it is atrocious that anyone is protecting him for killing innocent people. If they weren't innocent people, if we're talking about people that knowingly were terrible and were abusers or pedophiles, known, you saw them do it, they did it to you, blah blah. I might have more of a sympathetic tone about myself. I'm not saying that I still wouldn't turn you in, but if this, let's say this guy has a wife and he came home and he had this cut on his hand, he had $3,000 in checks and money orders and, or cash and money orders, I would be like, what were you up to last night?
Yeah. And
knowingly, I would be told, and then I would probably sleuth a little bit. But this story, when it happened, it was on the news. She probably would have heard about it if she exists, and she protected him.
Yeah.
But if he had nothing else to lose, maybe he didn't have a wife. Maybe he lost his job as a cop, and his person left him, not wife, but person. Maybe all of his family was dead. Maybe he had no friends. Maybe he had no family. Maybe he literally had nothing. And he did this. But why? If you have nothing, why would you go and rob a grocery store and kill 3 people and attempt to kill 2 others? Well, he attempted to kill Jasper Hardy, even though he didn't injure him. Why would you do that if you had nothing anyway? Why would you want that?
I mean, somebody knows something, and he's in his 60s and mid-60s now. It's time to give up the ghost, bro.
If he's still alive, or even if he's not alive, even if he's dead,
somebody knows something.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, I will provide right now the numbers for the people that you can contact with this information. The Windsor Police Department at 252-794-3111. The Bertie County Sheriff's Department at 252-794-5330. The North Carolina SBI at 800-334-3000. They can also be reached on any of their online entities, their websites, their Twitters, their chat boxes. You can do this anonymously, and they will not trace you. If you know anything that could potentially provide these families and survivors and the town of Windsor with closure, I highly suggest doing that. And I don't have faith, but most people do. And I could not imagine my life ending knowing that I had the opportunity to provide peace to these families and these survivors and this entire town, and I decided to die with it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's no way that I could. I couldn't. I wouldn't.
Mm-mm.
I wouldn't.
No.
Wow, that's it's a hell of a case, and it's crazy how dramatic and then sudden it ends. And it's like, where's the rest? And there is no rest for whatever reason. Either they have information not releasing yet, or because they really just don't have anything.
And I would really honestly believe that the police department just doesn't have anything on it. That it's not for lack of effort. It's not for
No fault of their own. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they've stomped the pavement on this case for years. I mean, I'm sure that whatever cold case detective, looks at this case, probably opens it once a week just to refresh themselves and see if there's something that they missed, because this weighs on the SBI, the Brady County Sheriff's Department, the Windsor Police Department, the families. Like I've said before, Joyce Coburn Reason, one of her twins, went on to be a lawyer. And I have a feeling that had something to do with the fact that her mother was murdered.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. They never got peace. And even if they had gotten peace, I'm sure she still would have went on to be a lawyer. I don't know what kind of lawyer she is. I didn't want to invade her privacy by digging through it. But yeah, there's nothing. And like I said, this case has everything to be popular. This is movie level material. Folks should know about this. I mean, the guy stacked the bodies to reserve ammunition.
Yeah,
it happened after a holiday weekend. I mean, all of these things, add up to this being popular, and it's just not.
Wow. Yeah. I had no idea.
I didn't either. I would suggest reading Jeb Bond's book. It's 45 pages long, and like I said, he updates it whenever new information comes his way, which is one of the great things about ebooks, is that you can just go in and adjust it as needed. And so he runs this website. He still pays for it, and if there's anything new that pops up on it, he puts it on there.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, he's got a little memorial section to talk about the victims, about the community, media around this, and his book, plus, some other things. And then it's probably the most comprehensive case, or comprehensive place to find anything about this case. He's done a very, very good job. He's also got a Facebook, a Twitter, an Instagram, and an email. But yeah, like I said, it's closing-time.jebbond.net. And I believe that's all I have.
I don't have anything else. I mean, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot to talk about with it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's tragic as hell. And it's even tenfold because there's nothing else out there on it.
No, there's not, and it's really sad.
All right.
Today's Pearl of Wisdom is going to be a little bit different. It's also going to be part of our segue in this podcast. I wanted to discuss how to avoid being the victim of a robbery, if at all possible, and how to survive if you do become the victim of one. Mainly what I'm going to discuss involves the situations and places most of us would find ourselves in anyway, which would be mostly armed robberies such as muggings, purse snatchings, grocery store burglaries, banks heists, and home invasions. I know that the victims of the Below murders could not have done anything more than they did to survive. They did everything right, like I said before, to not end up, dead or injured. But I thought that maybe by talking about these basic requirements that perhaps someday, if any of us potentially find ourselves in a situation like this, that we might be able to make it out. So I wanted to say first that most armed robberies happen at night and in large cities. They don't typically occur during the day and in rural areas. That doesn't mean that they can't, but statistically they do happen at night and in busy areas. And probably because just volume means more opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, people are victims of muggings and purse snatchings. You're very unlikely to be involved in a building sort of incident, a grocery store burglary, a bank heist, or a home invasion. But it is a lot more common for people to be involved in muggings and purse snatchings. And the top tip to avoid these situations is to not walk alone, which I don't always agree with that, because it is typically unavoidable to not walk alone.
Yeah.
We all go to places by ourselves, but if you can help it, go with someone else. Be smart and have situational awareness if you do have to be alone. This means that do not carry around designer handbags or satchels. Don't wear designer clothing and expensive jewelry, because these things will bring attention to yourself in a negative way. You're basically a billboard showing that you have expensive tastes. And
these things will get you. You'll be, not only is it instantaneous, you can get followed and tracked, right, and people watch you get into your Beamer wearing your Prada and your Louis Vuitton, and it makes you a target.
It does. And a lot of these people will, they're wearing heels, or they're wearing footwear that is not conducive to getting away in situations, because they don't ever think they're going to be a target. But just because people are around you doesn't mean that any of those people that are around you are interested in protecting you.
Yeah.
You always, always have to maintain situational awareness and pay attention to yourself. So don't wear heels or any type of footwear that restricts your movement when you're going out. And for God's sake, stop wearing your fucking headphones and being on your phone when you're out in public.
Truth.
It drives me crazy.
Preach.
Yeah, I used to, when I was a college student, I was an older college student, and I would constantly tell, especially the girls, take your headphones out and listen to what's going on around you, because you are a target when you have your head bowed down and you're on and you have your earbuds in. You're easy.
Complacency kills.
Yeah,
and
they can walk up to you.
Yep, and human trafficking is at such an astronomical rate right now that you can easily be snatched up when you're walking. I mean,
it is everywhere.
AirPods and all these things that you're absolutely right. I mean, you saw it more being on campus. I see it in a different way. Yeah. People being hit by cars when they're crossing the street, because people are yelling at them, telling them not to go, and they don't hear it, and they get hit.
All they see is the green hand or the white hand saying, no, it's a white man that says go. And that's what they see. They don't pay attention to the vehicles or anything. They have these methods of distraction, and they allow themselves to stay distracted.
Yep.
And you get hurt, and you end up dead. Drives me nuts. It literally makes me feel insane with rage.
Because it's avoidable.
So easily avoidable. You will never, ever see me with headphones in, walking down the street or in my car. And I understand it for people that have autism, that have sensory issues. These people typically do not spend a lot of time by themselves either.
Yeah.
So, but that's one thing. If you're out by yourself, you need to try not to make yourself a victim. So, that means be smart, have situational awareness. You need to pay attention to your surroundings when you go into places or in large groups. You need to know where your escapes and exits are located everywhere you go.
Never get cornered. Never have your back in a wall. Never stand in a corner.
Yeah. If you're at like a restaurant and they sit you in a place where you're going to have your, your back against the wall, try to know where your exits still are. Jeff and I have this habit, and I actually learned it from a an old timer paramedic named Frank Cannon that I worked with. He every time we went out to eat, he would never let me sit facing the door. He would always face the door because in the old chauvinistic ways, men would sit facing the door so they could see if danger was approaching. And so actually that's what Jeff does.
Yeah, in my relationship it's the same way.
Yep. He has a military background. His sight's also better than mine. But
Fair.
even though he may sit facing the door, I'm typically situated facing a different exit or escape anyway, a back door or another way out. So we're both watching when we're out together who's going in and out, constantly maintaining situational awareness, because we know that even though we don't want to, we could be put in a position that is dangerous.
Yeah, and if you to add on to that, if you run, walk, or jog by yourself, always carry a weapon of some sort.
You know what? I just bought a baton like you have.
Yep.
Because when I go walking, I was actually concerned about dog attacks, but I have it. I don't wear earphones when I actually walk out anyway. Mm-hmm. I'll have my music on like a speaker outside of myself so that I still have the ability to hear, those ambient sounds. Yeah, but I have a baton, a collapsible baton that, the police use as well.
Yeah, when I used to go jogging or running back, in the thinner days, if I ran with music in my earphones, I had mace, a baton, or what they call a skull cracker on me. And, I never went without weaponry.
Yep. Even if it's, not a person, and like I said, wild dog attacks are they happen. I'm not saying they're common, but they happen. There's at least one every 2 months where a pack of wild dogs attacks a jogger or a walker. It's typically a female or a child, and they have no protection on them. So I'm not saying that it would help them survive, but I know that I have something else that as soon as you use it, there's a potential that they'll leave. Speaking of things that need to leave, don't let strangers approach you when you're out by yourself. Never answer anyone who asks you for the time or question or gives you or other questions that could cause you to actually take your eyes off of them to look at something else. So this is a common tactic that muggers will use. They'll walk up to somebody and say, "Do you have the time?" Which means most people have to pull their phones out or look at their Fitbits, and that means you're taking your eyes off of them. That gives the mugger the opportunity to reach for you or to grab something on you because you are not aware of what they're doing because your attention is someplace else.
That makes sense. I mean, because a lot of people want to help other people, and it's so arbitrary. Right. What time is it? Like me, I never, ever let people use my cell phone or call anybody for them.
No, never, ever give your cell phone to somebody else because I can guarantee you they're going to walk away with it.
If y'all heard that, sorry, it was a motorcycle outside my house.
Yeah, but they will walk away with it. And they're also trying to distract you, catch you off guard so that they can take your phone.
Oh, yeah. People will walk up to me at work and they'll go, hey, I need to make this phone call. I'll be like, I will do it for you because it's the work phone. I don't care if people take off. I'll call it for them. And if they run off with the work phone, I was trying to be a good person. But my personal cell phone, to dial the number for them, I have to look away from them, even to pull it out of my pocket. There's just so many things that I learned back when I was thinner to not do.
It's really, I will say, there is a statistic that does prove that larger people are not victims of kidnappings, but they are victims of muggings and purse snatchings because
we ain't as fast as we used to be.
Right. People wouldn't believe that when I was not as big as I am now, but not as small as I've ever been. I actually was a runner. And it would be shocking if you tried to take my purse, I could actually chase you down. I can't do it right now. I've had a concussion, but COVID's been hard on all of us. I've put on that COVID-19. Not gonna lie. But, it really just boils down to not making yourself a victim. Don't allow people to, ask you for directions or the time. And if they do, be like, I don't have anything on me to tell me that. Which means you cannot have your nose in your phone because they'll know then that you have the ability to do that. You want to, when you're out by yourself, do things that make yourself appear imposing or confident. I always am like this out in public anyway. It's my natural state of being. I always keep my head high and I stand up straight. I maintain eye contact with everyone around me when I'm walking because I am not afraid to stare you in the face. And I always walk with a purpose, even if I have no fucking idea where I'm going. I don't want anyone at any point to ever see weakness in me. If I have an injured limb, I don't limp if I can help it, because it's kind of like being in the wild. If you allow yourself to show weakness, you become a target. And would-be burglars are much more likely to attack people that have things in their hands, or if their hands are in their pockets, because you're not as easily able to defend yourself. You're much more easy to attack if you're not standing up straight and staring at them, because most of the time people are less likely to attack you if you've looked them in the eyes and they realize that you have enough confidence that it almost scares them.
You're not wrong. You're absolutely not wrong.
That's not wrong at all.
That is great advice.
It makes littler people, because you and I are both 5'9", so we're not small women.
No.
But for smaller people, doing these things, standing up straight, looking people in the eyes, kind of makes your height irrelevant.
Look at our mama.
Yeah, look at our mama. Exactly. I know. I've never actually seen my mama walk with her head down. She's always 5'1.5" and standing up straight. Yeah.
Our grandmother was, our great grandmother was the same way. You never saw her with her head down hardly at all, unless she was stepping over something because she was short.
Yep. So always do that. If you do actually end up, and the other thing is, never, ever, ever use ATMs at night.
Never, ever, ever use ATMs at night.
Most muggings occur at ATM machines at night. And it's frustrating, but because a lot of ATMs are, right on sidewalks or they're in very desolate locations like at banks that you can just walk up to that no one else is around. Somebody could be hiding in the shadows, and that's it. You can use an ATM machine in a convenience store with people around.
Yeah, like at a bar or whatever. There's those are a little different.
Right. I wouldn't do it unless you have other people around you. But during the day, it's less likely that something's going to happen. I have a car, and I don't live in a big city, so if I have to use an ATM, I use my vehicle and go up to it. It's a lot less likely somebody's going to try to mug me using an ATM in my car. But for people that, because how many times have you heard a story, the Eve Carson case comes up in my head, where they kidnap someone and they immediately take them to an ATM to use their bank card and their PIN number, and it's at night. And or there are cases where they get robbed at an ATM machine. This happens a lot with older people. Most muggings and impersonations actually happen against older people. Them just pisses me off, them motherfuckers. You're taking the weakest people in our society that have given so much to it, and you are betraying them by being stupid and assaulting them. But anyway, they will, older people will go up to an ATM, they'll use it, and then immediately get mugged, like almost at the ATM machine. So don't do things by yourself. Don't use ATMs at night. Don't make yourself a victim. Stand up straight. Don't let strangers approach you. Don't wear flashy clothes, especially if you're by yourself. Never wear heels unless you're like that lady at the gym that we used to go to that did all of her workouts in 6-inch stilettos.
Wild. She must have been a dancer.
She must have been, because that girl could run in those things. You know, it was her natural state of ninja being.
Yeah, and also when you go running or jogging or walking or whatever, make sure you wear very bright, vibrant colored clothing. Mm-hmm. Don't go running in black.
Make yourself visible.
Yeah, make yourself wear bright pinks, fluorescents, just be as obnoxious as you possibly can be.
Yep, and because I know typically if you go running, you're going to be wearing headphones and stuff, and it's almost impossible to run without something for most people. But have a weapon in your hand.
Carry weapons, wear flashy clothing, make yourself known and visible.
And go running in public places. Don't pick these back roads. Don't pick, these desolate lanes and run down them where nobody would know if you disappeared.
Yeah, like, there's some areas around where we live. It's very easy to pick, like, the Greenway and go running on the Greenway where I used to run. And then that dude was stabbed and killed at a park that I used to run at. And I was like, I could totally see it happening.
Well, the Chandra Levy murder involved a Greenway in a very busy city, but the Greenway wasn't busy, and her body laid there for months. And nobody, because it was, even though it was in a busy area, wouldn't know. So if you do actually find yourself on the other end of a bad situation and you can't escape, one of the main things that we are told or have been told and tell other people is stay calm. Do not fight back unless you have been trained to do so. And in your head, imagine a clear path of survival. Like try to think ahead, like what you need to do to survive this incident. Always do what your captors say. Mm-hmm. Give them anything that they want. Because money and material possessions can be replaced, even if it's your great-grandmother's engagement ring and you may never see it again. Would your great-grandmother want you to die for her ring?
Absolutely not.
Right. So give them whatever they want. Be very clear when you talk. Move slowly and explain everything that you're doing while you're doing it. So if, an assailant says, give me your wallet and your keys, hold your hands up and be like, I am moving to get my wallet and keys out of my pocket. Or be like, my wallet and keys are in my back left pocket. You can get them. Be very deliberate in what you say and say that I will cooperate with you. I am not going to fight. Get a good look at your assailant, but don't stare at them.
Yeah.
We're talking and if they tell you to close your eyes, close your fucking eyes.
So what about going from point A to point B?
So this is something I say a lot. Raven knows it, and I say it constantly. I say that you will never, ever, ever get me from point A to point B alive.
Yeah.
And the reason that I say this is because in 85% of cases where somebody moves a person from point A, where the attack initially started, to point B, where something ends up happening, they don't survive.
You will not make it back to point A if you get from point A to point B.
Yep.
They will not take me there alive.
Yep. And statistically, 85% might as well be 100. So the stuff I just told you involves cases where they're not moving you outside of the building. I don't mean point A to point B where, you're in the main lobby and they're moving you to a back room. That's different. Do what they say, because a lot of the times they'll just leave you there and go.
We're talking about getting in a car and driving to California.
Exactly. I'm talking about them, tying you up, blindfolding you, putting you in a bag and throwing you in a trunk, and you just ride it out. Because on that ride, I can guarantee you're not going to make it, because you're probably not, statistically speaking. So at that point, you have to decide whether or not the cost is worth the benefit of trying to find a way to get out.
I'm going to fight like hell.
Yep, and this goes to the thought of staying calm and having a clear path to survival. So you need to be able to have the presence of mind to recognize the situation that you're in, understand what you need to do. Try and be, you're going to be a lot better at this if it ever happens to you than I am, but be empathetic with your assailant. Try and talk about things that may tug at their heartstrings, but don't talk too much if you see they're getting agitated or whatever, so they may let you go. And then try to find weapons around you, things that you could do to protect yourself. People need to learn how to get out of zip ties that are behind their back. People need to learn how to escape rope when their hands are tied up.
There are YouTube videos on how to do that. And then briefly adding on to that, you need to have, I won't say what ours are, but you need to have safe words between you and people close to you. Yep. You need to have, something you send in a text message briefly, like, Raquel has something, I have something.
We have a particular set of emojis that we will send at the end of anything we write, or a particular saying, because a lot of the times, if you're being kidnapped, the assailant wants to throw your family off the track, so they'll have you send out a message that says something pretty generic, like, hey, I'm going to be late for dinner tonight.
When you're normally never late.
Right. If I'm late for dinner, something's wrong because A, I work from home, and B, I'm cooking dinner. So, but that Raven and I, and our mother knows it, and my husband knows it. We have a phrase that is innocuous, and we have a set of emojis, and if Raven gets this particular emoji from me, she knows to track my phone and to call the authorities because something big bad is going on.
Yeah.
And then there are tons of survival videos on YouTube, and there are tons of books on these things, but folks need to learn the basics. A lot of crimes that occur that involve muggings, robberies, and assailing people are crimes of opportunity. So they're going to use things of opportunity. They're not going to show up with their own zip ties and stuff. They're going to use whatever's around them. I mean, hell, at my house, God knows you could find a ton of things. So let's hope nothing happens at my house. But they're going to use rope and stuff. You need to know how to get out of these things.
Yeah, the biggest point is to stay calm. Yep. Situational awareness. Don't get in that situation to begin with. And if it does happen, stay calm. Think ahead.
Yep. Now, the Bilo, murders, there's nothing they could have done to change what happened. They did everything right. So, at the end of the day, it's sad, and it may not help you survive, but try. So, if you have any information on the Bilo murders, please contact the Windsor Police Department, the Brady County Sheriff's Office, or the North Carolina SBI. And that's all. Today's episode was written by Raquel Weiss. Sound editing and mixing by Raven Hutto. Our theme song was composed by Steve Brendley. Today's sources can be found on our Facebook or Instagram at Twins Discuss Podcast, or on our Twitter at Twins Discuss. The Twins will be back with a new episode in 2 weeks.